Hi, on today's Just Covered podcast, we talk to George, a full financial planner of chartered status that's going to talk about his way with customers, which is absolutely amazing. Looking at goal-based financial planning and how it can help the customers to get to where they want to be.
I think when you start getting down to that level with clients, that's where the kind of the real goals or concerns of that client then start to come out.
And yeah, I absolutely loved George's approach when it came to looking at how he can tee up protection with his customer, not to be a disturbance-based conversation, but actually looking at how it fits into their overall financial goals.
The industry as a whole and financial advisors and everybody maybe gets it a little bit wrong. People buy into something that's positive. They then take ownership of it. And it's not just something their financial advisors told them that they need.
For any financial planners out there or anybody looking to kind of get their protection conversations ready and started into 2024 or hear about the journey to chartership, absolutely give this episode a listen.
Hi, welcome to episode 15 of the Just Covered podcast. And I'm really looking forward to this one. We're already in February 2024. How have we got here? And as you know, our podcast is about advisors' views and opinions on the intermediary space. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Hazel, and today we're joined by George Laidlaw, who is a chartered financial planner for Gilson Gray. So nice to have you, George. Do you want to tell us a bit about your journey?
Yeah, of course. So I was working in banking for a couple of years. I was Nationwide Build Society. I was working toward a role in management and leadership. And I had been moved into a role as a mortgage advisor, and it was really partly to gain a bit of experience, learn a bit more about the business before sort of moving on to other things. And that was kind of my first sort of introduction, if you like, to advice and that role. And to be honest, it was quite a career-defining moment for me because actually I really enjoyed the role. You know, as a job, you're sitting down with people, you're getting to know them, you're learning everything you can about them. And the best part about it really is you're trying to help them with the problem to an extent. And I think for me, there was just an enormous sense of gratification with that. You know, it was just really quite enjoyable in that sense. And so I think about 6 months into the role, I had kind of abandoned this idea of what I was going to be doing and just started looking to see where I could take this advice role in that sense. So I put myself through my diploma to become a financial advisor. Had looked around at a couple of different roles, and I liked the look of the St James's Place Academy because I was very conscious that having the diploma is one thing, but you need to learn the role and get that experience. So I put myself through the academy, met a great kind of group of people, part of the cohort going through. It was people that we still stay in touch with today, which is really, really good. And I spent a bit of time freelance, really just kind of operating myself, just trying to find my feet. I was in an okay position at the time, where I was able to just give myself that breathing space to see what worked, try different things, see where I was comfortable, focusing primarily on mortgages and protection to start with, just as that was my comfort zone. That's kind of where I had come from. And then just started moving into other areas, and I got an opportunity to go into practice. I think for myself, as I was kind of going through the role and as you know, things were going okay, but I kind of started to realise, you know, there's a lot of things you don't know what you don't know sometimes, and so I saw an opportunity to start learning from other advisors, and I saw that as a real way to develop in that sense. So I had gone into practice, learned a whole heap from my peers and those around me. The practice sort of merged with another practice, which was brilliant because it meant even more people to kind of learn from. And that was just kind of how I saw my development. Basically, it was just kind of keep working, keep meeting people, keep developing, and that's it. Along the way, I became a father, which was interesting. Trying to be a self-employed financial advisor in a practice with a newborn was really, really challenging, but at the same time it was a great motivator to just go out and nail it really, and just sort of kind of keep the wheels turning in that sense. Along the way I started to work toward my chartership as well, and it was more just because it felt like a natural progression. I had my diploma, I was learning the role, and for me it was just something to do to kind of almost kind of validate what I knew in that sense. I felt like I knew the role pretty well by this point, but actually the chartership was really just that stamp of approval in that sense that actually, yes, you know, I'm okay at what I do in that sense.
To say, when I saw it on your LinkedIn, 'cause we worked together obviously at Nationwide a long time ago, and I do remember saying, you know, you just got married, you know, having a baby, and then I saw on LinkedIn that you were now doing this chartership, and I thought, how is he fitting all this in? So how did you balance that? And
glutton for punishment, I think. But no, to be honest, I think, as I said, studying is really difficult anyway in any situation when you're trying to do it alongside a full-time job, right? And then obviously you add the family dynamic into that, and you just think, you know, realistically, where do you find time? I think my thing is that I was learning so much from the people, my peers, and the people around me anyway. So I was kind of learning the job that way, and to be honest, that's how I learn more effectively. You know, I'm a doer. I need to kind of see things happen. I need to be involved in it. Kind of sitting down and formally kind of going through study material, you know, so that you have to do it. It's a crucial part of getting your chartership. But I felt like I was learning more just in the day-to-day job anyway, so just being in it. So when it came to actually doing exams and whatnot, and looking at the course of the material, the coursework that I had to do, nothing was that alien in that sense. It kind of felt like actually I do know quite a lot about that topic already. I just need to kind of study and fill it out and polish my knowledge around that side of things. So you just find a way to make a balance, and being self-employed I think helped in that respect, because I was able to manage my time differently. You know, it wasn't kind of a standard 9 to 5 that I was doing. I could shift my day to fit around the family and to fit around study. So if I study better in the morning, which is typically what I did, then that's when I would study, and work would kind of move to later in the evening and whatnot, making time for bedtime and all the rest of it for the wee one. But yeah, so I mean, managed to get through chartership. My daughter, she's 2 now. I feel like she's 2 and I've aged about 10 years in that time. So maybe that's telling and how you balance it. You pay for it in other ways possibly, but no, you just find a way. That's it really.
The question is, what's the biggest challenge between bringing up your daughter, also all the actual chartership you got? As I know, I've got 13-year-old daughters, so very that age you chase them around, aren't you, and doing absolutely keeping you fit.
Absolutely.
And, it's no mean feat to balance that as well. You've mentioned a few times just about the academy quite a lot. You speak about that really, really fondly.
Yeah.
And the fact other people that you've worked with and you've checked in with them, you're seeing them do things, all that type of stuff. How sort of the importance of that is obviously coming across. That seems really, really important. And so the relationships and those bonds you've built up, how have they sort of developed as you've moved along, all of you, along your careers?
Yeah, I think it's it's a difficult thing that you're going to set out and do in that sense. You know, you're setting up self-employed, you're kind of going out, and everybody has different backgrounds, you know, so no 2 people had the same background in that sense. And there are things that people gravitate more towards. So there are some things that I'm better at. There's some things that some of my peers are better at and whatnot. And so kind of going through that process, it makes sense, first and foremost, to stay in touch, because again, there's that opportunity to share in each other's knowledge and experiences. And, you know, in terms of relationship and staying in contact, you know, some people you'll see quite frequently, some people you won't see very often. But when you do bump into each other again further down the line, whether it's at a seminar or an event or something like that, it's not awkward, it's not uncomfortable, because you've almost kind of had that shared experience to some extent, and it's quite easy in that sense. But I do think it's important, and I think it's a big part about doing the job, is that no one can be perfect in everything, in that sense. That there's things that you're good at, there's things that you're not so good at, but having the community around you is really, really important. And that was probably my takeaway from it. And that's not just advisors, that's also, other people in the industry as well, in that sense. It's just having that contact, and you learn loads from it, and you become stronger because of it.
So that's really why we set up this podcast, because, well, like yourself, I had a background of being surrounded by advisors, and I was learning. I really took bits of best practice from those, and that made me the advisor that I became. And I still think of some of the one-liners or the little bits of conversation that people use. And that's why when, you know, Wayne and I got our heads together, we thought, how do we give advisors a platform that they can tap into and learn and listen, because you are out on your own a lot of the time, and you're maybe, especially what we find in the protection space, a lot of advisors want to do it or want to refer it, but they think, how do others do it in the industry? Traditionally, I haven't. How do I now bring it in? Then you started off with protection, obviously, mortgages and protection. So how have you maintained that protection kind of journey throughout your kind of career and how it's developed?
I do think it's how you view it. I think that protection can sometimes be seen as a bit of a negative thing because of what it means. So when if somebody's needing to claim on protection, it's because something has happened in that sense. And honestly, this is an opinion, but in my opinion, I don't think that we necessarily, as an industry, present it in the right way. I think that we can present it like that, almost that it's a negative. It's one of those things you don't want to have to use it, but it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? So I think that that's often been the mentality around it, and that's almost how it's taught as well for advisors coming through. I mean, you'll have been through it yourself, no doubt. Like when you're being trained to speak to people about protection, you create a disturbance, right? You show the kind of the circumstance and what the client's circumstance will look like if something bad was to happen, if somebody was to pass away or be diagnosed as seriously ill or whatnot. And I think that the kind of the approach with that is that it sets the tone for the discussion. And from a client's perspective, that can maybe feel quite overwhelming and quite daunting. It's almost like you feel like you have to take it. Your arm is almost being twisted. It's not that it's good or bad. It's just that you're maybe not doing the right thing if you don't take on protection. And I mean, an example of that, I had a client that came to see me, and we were talking about something else that was completely different. And I was just doing a fact find on their circumstances, and they had kind of said, "Oh yeah, and we've also got this critical illness cover. We've had it for years. We took it out ages ago. I don't really know if we still need it. What do you think?" And I think what they were hoping I would turn around and say is look at it and go, "Yeah, you probably don't need it. Your circumstances have moved on. That's just that." Or I think what they maybe expected me to say was, "You should probably just hang on to it anyway." But I think if you can take that and try to kind of put a more positive spin on it, and when I looked at this document, I said, that's a fantastic policy that you've got. It's an older critical illness cover. There's conditions in there that aren't covered in modern policies that come out. I would really hang on to that, and I'd kind of well done for taking it out in the first place, having the foresight to do that. I think if you can kind of change the narrative on it and make it more of a positive, and you kind of saw the change in them in that sense, they kind of go, actually, well, we'll hang on to that then, and even when I go back and do their annual reviews, because they're now kind of wealth clients in that sense, and we talk about their circumstances, and they're telling me they've got this policy that they don't want to touch, kind of thing, and it's changing that mindset that actually this is something that's quite valuable. It's really important. So I think that from my role and in terms of what we do is it's just thinking about what the client wants, going through that kind of that goal-based planning, planning with a purpose, whatever you want to call it, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and building protection into that as a positive thing, that you're backing yourself, you're making sure that you're gonna meet those goals. A really common example I have is where people want to save to help their kids get on the property ladder, which is more and more common at the minute. And that's fine. As a financial planner, I can sit down and I can say, right, okay, well, you want to save X amount, this is what you need to put away each year, we'll do X, Y, and Z with it to get you to where you want to be. And in 5-10 years time, whatever, you'll have the pots that you're looking for. But that in itself is a prime point to start talking about protection, because there is a risk there. That saving has been funded by income. So what happens if the income stops, either through illness or critical illness or death, even in that sense? If that's a really important goal, you could go down the disturbance route and say, right, okay, if something bad happens, then you won't be able to help your child get onto the property ladder. Or you can turn around and say, actually, by doing X, Y, and Z, we're going to save to this point, but just in case things go wrong, we're also going to put an insurance alongside that, which is just going to make sure that if anything does happen, you're going to achieve that goal, and we're going to work it all into that budget that you've got to allow that. It's a more positive thing. and the client then sees the value of it. They say, right, okay, well, that's going to get us there, and then we've got that protection. Fantastic. So I think that's where the industry as a whole and financial advisors and everybody maybe gets it a little bit wrong. And I suppose from my perspective, it's just trying to turn it around a little bit and show the benefit. People buy into something that's positive. They then take ownership of it, and it's not just something their financial advisors told them that they need.
I love the way that you approach that, in the calling out the traditional way of doing it, really. Like you mentioned, the disturbance element, which I suppose people go into as default, don't they?
Yeah.
Particularly if you're less experienced industry, and that's the way it's been trained out. But linking it to and I was thinking I would have asked you around the goal-based element, but you already told us. It's amazing in that we had someone in the previous podcast who was sort of marketed herself as a financial coach, if you like, and that's what you're doing, aren't you?
Yeah.
But you're actually a proper financial planner, where you're looking at that goal and you're helping the customers to get to where they want to get to, or the clients to get to where they want to get to. At the same time, you're building in those elements, those protections, if you like, those sort of fallbacks in terms of helping them to get there. And that's such a positive thing. It's a great way to focus, isn't it? And you're right, it brings that positive spin on everything you're doing. So it's just absolutely brilliant stuff. And was that something that you consciously thought, right, I'm going to do it this way? Or did you have a mentor that helped you do that? Did you work it out for yourself? How did that work?
I think for me, it just never really sat quite right, the way it was being taught in that sense. And I think it was something that just kind of developed as an idea, I suppose, that developed in my head over time. And the way I kind of likened it was, I think the way I arrived at it, you look at, so we talk to clients about investing all the time, whether it's in a pension or ISA or name a vehicle, whatever it is. And we talk about risk and reward within that, so the reward being, your funds are hopefully going to grow and do well and help you achieve your goals. The risk is, equity risk or sequential risk, or if it's property, if you're buy to let, you've got liquidity risk. And so we kind of temper that to make the client aware of both. And when you talk about an investment portfolio, there's multi-assets within that. There's different elements to make up that pot, and it's all about diversification in that sense. And when you think about a client's portfolio, which is the way I kind of talk about it, just their own actual financial circumstances, it's kind of the same thing to a large extent. So they've got property in their assets, if you like, in that they own their own home, for example. They've got cash savings. They maybe have an ISA, with a stocks and shares ISA or something like that. So if you take the kind of the mindset or the thought process behind an investment portfolio, and then you put that into the client's own circumstances, and you do a bit of comparison, if you're not talking about risk, of which ultimately protection is one of the key elements to plan against it, or to protect against in that sense, then you're kind of not having that full discussion, if that makes sense. So it was kind of that methodology that then kind of led me to, right, well, protection has to be an integral part of what we do. And then just how do you have that conversation? And as I said, just that negativity, when people come to a financial advisor, there's a reason for it usually. There is something that they want help with. And I think that to build a good relationship with that client, it has to feel good to them. It can't feel like a visit to the dentist in that sense, where it's going to be painful. So it was just trying to inject a little bit of positivity into, and actually then, when clients enjoy it more, when they enjoy the process more, and you build a better relationship, your review process and whatnot, it just makes for a much easier environment, and you stay better connected with your clients in that sense.
It's funny when you said liken it to the dentist, because there's a gentleman in industry, Andy Walton, and he did a brilliant talk not long ago where he said protection conversations, we could learn a lot from dentists, because actually dentists is such a painful process.
Yeah.
We still go and see them every 6 months every 6 to 12 months. Why are we not doing the same reviews for our client? That should be as normal for our client in the financial and mortgage space as it is, because they're happy to do it, as you said, in the painful world of these dentists. I love that positivity. We quite often on our training webinars, it's interesting you've brought it out, because we didn't even speak about this beforehand. We talk about using the cash flow model to show that, and use those financial goals. If you are in cash flow modelling, just remove one of the incomes and you can quickly see all the red that then starts to appear, all the goals that you've worked really hard with your client to develop are just, as you said, they're gone. But it doesn't have to be a disturbing conversation. It is about that lovely, positive, goal-based planning. Now, you touched upon you've got clients wanting to save up for their kids to buy a home.
Yep.
Now, we've done a bit of research recently at Legal & General. It's called the Bank of Family. And what we found is it's about 47% of house purchases kind of going forward for those under the age of 55 are going to be funded by family or supported by. It's interesting you've mentioned you see more and more of that coming up as your clients. What kind of conversations do you have around that and the protection that they kind of working towards it, or the sort of gifting aspect and the risk there as well?
I think that it is something that's quite prevalent. You know, it's kind of the elephant in the room to a large extent, particularly for families and that intergenerational planning that we do. It is just a fact. It is becoming harder and harder to get on the property ladder. I mean, even since, you know, I've owned a home for, no idea, actually about 10 years, something like that. But even in that time, it's become harder even still. So it doesn't surprise me that these conversations come out and that your data kind of reflects that either. I see, you know, and it is a challenge. You know, ultimately that's something that we do have to address. And so when clients are talking about it more and more, I do think it shows an awareness in society that actually that this is becoming harder. From a kind of a planning perspective, you know, the risks are there, kind of, as I've kind of illustrated. You know, it's all well and good pulling together a plan that's going to say, right, if we do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get there, and you're going to be able to help your children get onto the property ladder or whatever it may be. But again, it's back to that fallback of, you know, what if something happens? You know, what if you're not able to meet that goal? It's kind of that knock-on effect of, well, the next generation then is going to have it tougher as a result, which ultimately will mean that they're then unable to help their future generation and whatnot. So it can actually be quite a potentially massive problem in that sense. I just think that really that's kind of where that goal-based planning comes in. And you mentioned cash flow modelling, so that's a lot of what we do. It's a great way to sort of visualise it and bring it to life for clients so that they can actually see on a graph or on paper or on screen the challenges that are there, and showing them what can happen where things don't quite go as planned, but then also the benefit of the advice in that sense. So by saving, you're going to achieve this, and that's, I think, where cash flow modelling has been used quite a lot, but the protection side of it is really important as well. It's, you know, despite things going wrong, you know, financial protection can't stop bad things from happening, but it can at least help to take away the financial impact of that or soften it to some extent. And I think when you start getting down to that level with clients, that's where the kind of the real goals or concerns of that client then start to come out. When you start having those conversations, it's just breaking down those barriers a little bit.
Also, it's the value of your advice, isn't it?
Totally.
Like you're absolutely demonstrating that I care about you and I care about making these goals happen. I'm not just thinking about that end plan. I want to make sure I'm with you throughout that journey. And I said, you can't stop.
Yeah.
We'd all love to be able to stop all the you know, health issues in the world, but we can't, and it is recognising that what position would you like to be in, rather than those disturbance techniques.
And it's just covering everything, isn't it? So we talked before we were starting the podcast today, and you gave us some information around how your company's set up fairly recently, and I take it you're linked with a law firm now.
Yeah.
So and that enables you, from what you were saying, to cover absolutely everything, doesn't it, in terms of to help meet that goal. So could you elaborate a little bit on how you interact with the law firm and how that works?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it was quite an interesting one because it's kind of two worlds colliding to some extent in that regard. So it's a completely different profession, and you learn a lot from that, just in terms of how they work and how the solutions that they pull together for their clients, because it's still advice at the end of the day. It's just a different field. And there is that, I suppose, you know, when we are giving financial advice, there is always that focus on, you know, do you have a will? Do you have power of attorney in place? Because these are protections in themselves, albeit just in a different way. And so the way it tends to work for us as a practice is that it's just that bit more streamlined in that sense, that we do have solicitors that we can pull in and ask for their advice or to speak with one of our clients in relation to that, but vice versa. Again, it works two ways, because equally for solicitors, they will invariably come across situations where a financial planner is needed to some extent, and It could be helping an executive who's dealing with an estate of somebody that's passed away. It can be divorce in terms of how you split a pension and whatnot. And then business as well, so business owners and sort of just providing sort of a general financial advice for them in terms of their own pensions, directors' pensions, and again, business protection. That's where you tend to see that coming through.
That's quite a key, would you say, professional connection then? Because they've obviously got, from what you've just said there, I mean, there's aspects of that I hadn't even considered. I always immediately, when I think solicitors, think business protection opportunity naturally because of where we are in industry. But as I said, like divorce, that's massive. We've actually got a special podcast we're recording today on divorce and how financial planners navigate that. That's getting recorded next. So that's interesting that you say that you see that in your field as well. And then obviously all those other little aspects of inheritance tax, how they manage the estate. And that's a huge, huge role that each of you play. And having such a streamlined journey for a customer can only be a positive thing.
How does that make you feel that you've got that interaction and that backup when you're doing that professional support with your clients?
I mean, it's a real, I suppose it brings a great degree of confidence, I think, around the process in general, because before we had that connection, and we work with a lot of professional introducers, various solicitor firms and accounting firms and whatnot, and you can always make these referrals, but because it's all sort of more in-house, it gives us an opportunity to learn more about the process in itself, and I think that's a big thing. So when you are speaking to clients about these things, obviously we can't advise in these areas, but just the knowledge a bit more about what that looks like and how that process works, you can then give that reassurance.
Like signposting to you up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really helps make that journey smoother than just saying, I can refer you for this, off you go. You can actually, and this is what it looks like.
It's value add. It's your proposition, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's both firms.
That's it. So it does. It brings together quite a lot. And I think then from a client's perspective, it's just, it cuts down a lot of legwork for them, if nothing else. It's all in one place. So they're not having to deal with multiple firms to get things done for them. And often these challenges, whether it's law, whether it's financial planning, whether it's accountancy, there is always occasions where there is need for more than one discipline in that sense. And so having that connection just streamlines all of that, and it just makes things really easy for the client.
And you have an expert. You don't have to be a jack of all trades.
No.
You've got an expert that covers absolutely everything.
Absolutely.
It's a different area for you. Amazing stuff.
Yes. I mean, it definitely sounds that you've really used your experience and your learns along the way of, I'll try and do everything myself. When you first went out and tried, I'll do everything myself. Actually, you've really been agile to adapt and change and then pull all these experts into one place, and ultimately for your client to have the best experience. That's been really, really great and
so insightful.
Out of all the things that we've spoken about today, also there's been a huge amount. What would you say would be your one tip to other advisors in industry, whether that be around protection or other areas of financial planning? What would be your one bit of advice you'd give to them?
I suppose the thing that's helped me the most by far is that community in that sense. And you kind of said it can sometimes feel like quite an isolated job in that sense. If you're out on the road a lot, you're seeing clients, or if you're in an office, you can feel very kind of closed in with your own clients. And actually, achieving chartership and all these things that we've done over the years, it's all been made possible by the people that you're around in that sense. So if I was to give myself advice starting over again, or anybody else coming into the industry, it's try to make contacts with your peers, try to get good relationships with your peers, because ultimately when you've got a client, you will eventually meet a client and you just don't really know where to start with it. Having somebody with the experience to step in and actually say, look, this is what I would do, you learn so much from that. And it's not an ego thing or anything like that. You need to put that to the side, because for you to be better, you need to push that forward. The other small thing I would say is just push yourself out your comfort zone as well. I mean, I think that's probably the montage of my career, is just pushing myself that a little bit further out. It sounds a bit cliche to say that, but to give a really quick example of that, when I was in the academy and we had a very well established advisor had come in to speak to us and just share their wisdom kind of thing. And he was just kind of giving sort of insight into how he had built his client base over the years, how he'd built his business. And one of the things he said, another thing that you can do is you can do seminar work. That's quite a well-trodden path. Who here, for example, would be comfortable getting up in a room and just talking for half an hour, 45 minutes about retirement planning? And in a room of 20, 2 people put their hand up, and neither of them were me in that sense. But for me, it was like a light bulb thing of, actually, if I can get good at that, then that gives me an edge. It gives me an advantage over everybody else in that sense. So it started with just small workshops, kind of in a team setting, and then kind of growing out. And I now get employed to go into businesses and actually do sort of pension seminars and presentations and whatnot. But I mean, 5 years ago, that would have been the worst thing in the world for me mentally to think of having to go and do. But it's how you grow. It's just pushing yourself that little bit further. So I know that was maybe too
Thanks for sharing. That's amazing. Putting yourself out there, saying to people, just do it. And also, just building on that as well, from what you were saying, you never know the positive impact that you make. Whilst you're getting from learning from your peers, you would have helped them with stuff as well.
Of course, it's a two-way street, and it's that's part of it. And that's where that relationship builds. It's not a one-way thing where you just keep taking help. You do then pass it back as well, and it just builds that relationship around you.
Fantastic.
Well, congratulations on such a brilliant career since we worked together. You've done a massive amount, so it's been lovely to catch up, and I hope that's been really useful to everybody listening. I certainly picked up a lot myself on that one. Thank you, George.
Thank you so much, Jules.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.